As soon as the azure ember left the green-robed woman's hands, it shined with blinding azure light. Afterwards, it began to revolve around her head and give rise to an astonishing display. The azure-white flames that burned on the exterior of the white lotus was overtaken by the lantern ember and were quickly absorbed. Once the jade sun flames were cleanly absorbed, the flaming ember floating above her head had stopped and were simply shining slightly brighter. The green-robed woman then pointed at the ember and had it flutter in the direction of Silvermoon. Silvermoon was greatly alarmed and pointed at the purple cloud lace without another thought. Suddenly, the purple net brightly shined with light and a portion of it moved in front of her. At that same moment, the ancient flower basket appeared in her hand. Then, the huge azure sword roaring with thunder arrived above the woman, immediately striking down at her under Han Li's command. Of course, Silvermoon conducted a joint attack at that moment. She had the flower basket envelop her body as white mist and clutched her hands in an incantation gesture, opening a large hole in the white lotus barrier in a sudden flash of purple light. Having witnessed the astonishing pressure of the huge sword, the woman's expression changed in alarm, wearing a grave expression for the first time in this encounter. After a moment of hesitation, she ceased her attack on Silvermoon and completely concentrated her body's spiritual power into the white lotus beneath her. In an instant, the white lotus petals surrounding her increased several times in number and mirages of lotuses began to fold around her in a dense barrier. At that moment, she suddenly pointed at the lantern ember and had it return to flying above her head. Afterwards, the woman lifted the copper lantern in her head and waved it in front of her. A series of azure flame mirages appeared along with 2 flame embers. The 2 flame embers then flew towards the woman's head and condensed together with the original azure flame ember to form a first-sized azure fireball. At that moment, the huge sword arrived at the lotus petal barrier. Rolls of thunder and a huge rumbling explosion sounded out as white light, golden lightning, and blue flame entwined. While the tensome lotus petals were rather remarkable, the divine devilbane lightning and the celestial ice flames were also a force to be reckoned with. While they alone might not be able to overcome the lotus mirages, when combined together into the huge sword, the combined might of 72 bamboo clouds' warm swords eventually shattered through the lotus mirages despite their greatest attempt to resist, and faded away into specks of starlight. Unimpeded, the huge sword continued its descent, only for the blue ball of flame to unhurriedly meet it. Han Li's expression turned solemn at the sight. Although he felt some fear towards this odd azure flame, he was quite interested in measuring the might of the celestial ice flame against the lantern's flame. The impact between the huge sword and the azure fireball was completely silent. Regardless of whether it be the golden lightning or the icy flames, they were both instantly consumed by the azure flame. It then began to engulf the huge sword. The bamboo cloud's warm swords were Han Li's bonded magic treasure, so it was natural for him to feel it quite closely. In the instant the azure flames completely enveloped the huge sword, he felt his mind tremble as unbearable pain and scorching heat assailed him. His body's temperature abruptly risen, he could almost feel his blood boil. In great alarm, Han Li instantly formed an incantation gesture and pointed to the huge sword. With that done, the sword wildly flickered and transformed back into many small swords before scattering. He originally believed that this would rid him of the strange flame. But when he clearly saw what happened, his expression vastly changed. All of his flying swords were simultaneously covered in burning azure flame. Han Li's expression wavered as he felt his body's condition worsen, sweat began to profuse from his body. He gritted his teeth in astonishment and quickly cycled through several hand incantations, ordering the 10 strands of spiritual sense controlling the flying swords to fly to the sky. Then in an attempt to escape the flames, they began to wildly revolve. Having saw the silver bell melted into silver liquid, he grew even more fearful of having his own bonded magic treasure destroyed. If this were the case, his vitality and spiritual sense would suffer a great decrease. At that moment, the destroyed lotus mirages had been replaced as more lotuses emerged from below her to restore the gap. The woman then coldly glanced at Han Li's flame-clad flying swords. The woman sneered upon seeing the swords flutter around in an attempt to extinguish the flames. However, she didn't rush to act. She simply waited for Han Li's bonded magic treasure to be destroyed for his cultivation to be greatly damaged. A short moment later, the woman's sneer had froze, soon to be replaced with astonishment. The bronze lamp in her head was no common magic tool. Strictly speaking, it didn't even belong to her. It was one of the 2 lineage treasures that were passed down by the Mulan tribes. This sage was able to acquire this treasure not only because of her profound cultivation, but also because she was the most powerful female spell warrior in the Mulan. Most importantly, she was the only woman who held a similar rank to the soaring tribe S. Saintess Qianlan, and received much esteem amongst other high-grade spell warriors. Even the Mulan S3 divine sages had to treat her with respect. Ever since she acquired this ancient treasure, she had only used the lantern a few times due to its restrictions and peculiarities. When the treasure reached the maximum quantity of uses, it would immediately be revoked and be given to the next suitable master. The treasure was held with great importance amongst the Mulan. However, the most important use for the bronze lantern wasn't for battle. Rather, it had a specific and extremely important use. Of course, this treasure was obviously powerful in battle, and was used by its masters to slay many formidable enemies and destroy countless treasures. Be they ancient or magic treasures, the flames were incapable of being extinguished once they were covered. Wood attribute treasures were particularly vulnerable to the flames and would be destroyed in an instant. But while Han Li's set of flying swords were obviously wood attribute magic treasures, they had been enveloped in the Lantern S flames for quite a while and didn't show the slightest indication of becoming ash. But in the instant that she was absorbed by her surprise, purple light suddenly flashed above her head along with the abrupt appearance of a purple cloud. The green-robed woman was stunned, and she turned her gaze to look at Silvermoon, who had used the opportunity to launch a restriction with the purple cloud lace. Then with a turn of her body, Silvermoon filled the air with a fragrant pink mist, covering the white lotus in the blink of an eye. The green-robed woman snorted and glanced at the lantern in her hand. After a moment of hesitation, she decided not to further use it and instead raised her arm, summoning a yellow jade pendant into her hand. Just as she thought to activate the pendant and deal with Silvermoon, the pink fragrant mist was shaken and the scent grew stronger. Afterwards, countless handsome men and beautiful women began to emerge from the mist and embrace each other in an extremely bold and intimate fashion, causing the green-robed woman's complexion to grow scarlet. She-demon, you're courting death. The woman's complexion soon grew pale, and yellow light glowed from the jade pendant. Yellow mist enveloped her and scattered the pink mist around her. However, Silvermoon could no longer be seen. The green-robed woman sneered. But just as she thought to seek Silvermoon out, something suddenly came to mind and she hastily glanced in Han Li's direction. In the short amount of time that Silvermoon had bothered her, Han Li had already condensed his flying swords back into its huge form and recalled it before him. He was currently staring at it with a grave expression. The woman was hit by another wave of shock upon seeing that the flying swords had yet to be scorched, but she was no longer about to continue staying still. She immediately raised the bronze lantern in her head, but just as she thought whether or not she should waste another of its uses to strike down Han Li, he suddenly placed both of his hands on his chest. With one hand holding a mist of white frost and the other holding blue flickering flames, he spat a mist of azure chi to envelop them together. With a gust of wind, an egg-sized purple flame appeared in his hand. Han Li pointed it with his free hand and it suddenly ruptured before transforming into a small fluttering bird. It spread its wings and charged towards the huge sword that was enveloped in the lantern's azure flames. With a light bang, a strange scene occurred before them. The purple flame and the azure flame blazed on the surface of the huge sword. Both of the flames swayed and gave neither way to one another, giving its utmost to consume the other. For a time, neither flame had the advantage. As Han Li observed this with a nervous expression, the green-robed woman appeared even more shocked. What were these purple flames to not fear the flames of her lantern? Had she not seen this personally, she wouldn't have dared to believe it. But this woman soon awoke from her shock and only felt a stronger desire to kill Han Li. How could a mere early nascent soul cultivator possess so many heaven-defying abilities? If he were to enter mid or even late nascent soul stage, he could sweep through the entire Mulan plains without a match. With that thought, the woman's expression grew sullen and she flung the lantern in the air. It stopped about 3 meters above her. She then solemnly sat down. At the moment, the woman had truly resolved herself. Even if she consumed all uses of the bronze lantern, she would slay Han Li with complete certainty. Han Li had also taken note of the woman's actions and he felt his heart drop. He bitterly cursed in his mind before deciding to retreat. Although he still had the purple apex flames and the blood devil sword, there was no need for him to stake it all on this fight. The woman before him was no ordinary mid-nascent soul stage cultivator. He was particularly unwilling to end this battle in mutual destruction. As these thoughts stirred in Han Li's mind, a silhouette suddenly appeared in the mist and charged towards them, much to their surprise. As the both of them were distracted, purple cloud formed from the purple cloud lace above the green-robed woman's head and suddenly parted and released an immensely fast streak of white that flew towards the lantern. Then in a flash of white light, the lantern was completely enveloped by the light and was fiercely dragged back towards the purple cloud. Han Li rejoiced at seeing the bronze lantern seized, much to the green-robed woman's despair. In an instant, her face paled with an expression of furious alarm. Soon after, she raised her arms, sweeping a white mist around her. The white lotus below her began to wildly revolve, producing a lotus mirage that appeared as large as a mountain. Once the white light holding the lantern returned to the cloud, the huge lotus mirage had already launched after it in pursuit. The purple cloud then transformed into a large purple net and dropped down. In the next instant, the lotus struck the net, releasing a glow of purple and white light. Silvermoon's sweet chuckle soon followed. After the purple net was released, the white light faded away to reveal Silvermoon. She laughed as she held onto the ancient flower basket. Its interior shined with white light as it rigidly trapped the bronze lantern. Once the green-robed woman's spiritual sense was wiped from it, it would be capable of being used by anyone. But before Han Li could bask in his excitement, a silhouette staggered towards them and spotted both Han Li and the green-robed woman engaged in battle. The silhouette shouted to Han Li in panic, "Fellow Daoist Han, quickly run! A Mulan divine sage has arrived. He has already killed fellow Daoist Lu. Hurry and run!" This silhouette turned out to be Old Man Ma, but his hair was disheveled and one of his arms was missing. A Mulan divine sage. Han Li felt his heart drop upon hearing this. Just as he thought to ask further of the matter, Old Man Ma flew away in a flash of white light, not daring to stay a moment longer. But at that moment, an indifferent man's voice soon arrived. "You're too late. I've already found you. You had abandoned your arm to escape calamity, but let us see what other secret techniques you have. Surely you didn't refine a substitution puppet out of your other arm as well? If that is the case, I will truly hold you in admire. Is this not the bright essence lantern? You cunning scoundrel, your courage is quite great. A little fox such as yourself dares to take a lineage treasure of the Mulan." The words were spoken in quick succession and the speaker of the voice soon arrived before them. A silver streak of light shot out from the sea of mist in a seemingly slow manner, but it instantly arrived before Silvermoon. Silvermoon's complexion grew deathly pale and she hastily waved her arm, summoning a purple net in front of her. At that same moment, she instantly took off without a further thought. The silver streak paused for just a moment before immediately transforming into a large silver hand. It forcibly took the purple cloud lace in its grasp and formed a fist before striking at the air in the direction that Silvermoon had fled. As Silvermoon flew off in a streak of yellow light, she was suddenly struck by a silver ball of light out of seemingly nowhere. With a miserable wail, her yellow light disappeared and she fell from the sky. But in her cunning, she gritted her teeth and bore through the pain, throwing the ancient flower basket towards Han Li in a streak of white light. "You're courting death!" The man's voice grew furious and in a flicker of light, the silver hand split into two with one chasing the flower basket and the other chasing after the falling Silvermoon in an attempt to crush her. The action was conducted as swiftly as a flash of lightning. Silvermoon turned pale with fright and she hastily attempted to draw on her magic power to escape. However, silver light flashed from her body and she found herself incapable of drawing any of her magic power. That surprise strike from before had not only heavily injured her, but it had placed a simple restriction on her body. Although it could be easily broken, she was caught by surprise and didn't have the time to dispel it. The huge silver hand approached her with the momentum of a falling mountain, and she felt her heart tremble. She could only shut her eyes as she waited for death, but at that moment, she heard thunder roar behind her. With an arm holding her by the waist, she had somehow escaped from the silver hand's grasp. "We're going." Han Li made a clear appearance before disappearing from sight with Silvermoon in tow. The huge silver hand had missed its mark by just a sliver. In the next moment, Han Li appeared 100 meters away at the edge of the mist with a sullen expression. He carried Silvermoon in one hand and the huge sword blazing with azure and purple flames in the other. "Yi! Lightning movement!" An astonished voice came from the huge silver hand. As for the other hand, it returned with the flower basket in its grasp. The two silver hands then combined together in a brilliant glow of light, disappearing to reveal a middle-aged spell warrior in scholar robes. He held onto the purple cloud lace with one hand and he grabbed the ancient flower basket with the other. He was examining Han Li in the distance with a calm expression. When Old Man Ma had seen this person appear, his face became deathly pale, and despite the light that continuously pulsed from his body, he didn't dare to flee. Han Li's gaze flickered as he carefully examined the very first late-nascent soul stage cultivator he had seen for the first time. Apart from the few sparse cultivators that managed to reach deity transformation stage, late-nascent soul stage cultivators were peak existences in the cultivation world. At that moment, the middle-aged spell warrior glanced around and spotted the green-robed woman surnamed Le. With a wave of his hand, he tossed the ancient flower basket containing the bronze lantern towards her. Many thanks for Divine Sage Zhong's assistance. Had Brother Zhong not come, the green-robed woman was delighted that she managed to regain possession of the bronze lamp and felt immense relief. Even as arrogant and cold as she may be, she was facing one of the 3 Mulan Divine Sages, and she didn't dare to offend him in the slightest. The scholarly middle-aged man calmly said, "It's nothing. I've simply heard that the Heavenly South cultivators were sending reinforcements towards this grand formation. After hearing about Heavenweep's death, I grew somewhat worried and came over to take a look. It'd be best to give those from the state of Great Jin a reasonable explanation, as we are currently intertwined with them. But since our enemy is capable of using lightning movement, it is no wonder even Sage Le has a problem dealing with him." Afterwards, he turned to look at Han Li and asked, "That small fox is yours? It is quite courageous to dare to act against our Mulan's lineage treasure. Since you're her master, then I'd best deal with the both of you." Han Li narrowed his eyes and took a deep breath. He snorted and icily replied, "Your tone is quite arrogant, but even if we didn't touch that lantern, would you still let us go free? I don't know if you have the skill to take my life." When the scholarly man heard this, his gaze swept past the huge sword in Han Li's hand. His face revealed astonishment upon seeing the azure and purple flames tangle against one another, but soon, he chuckled as if he hadn't seen it. "It has been many years since a cultivator dared to say that in front of me. Sagely, I'll hand that one-armed cultivator over there to you. As for our young friend capable of lightning movement, I'll be personally dealing with him. Let us see just how long he can last." Ruthless intent revealed from the man's face as his body suddenly blurred and silver light flashed from both his sides. Suddenly, 2 exact replicas of the scholarly man appeared at his side with the exact same clothes and face. They both stared at Han Li as if he were already dead. Han Li felt his breath run cold. He quickly swept his spiritual sense and couldn't find any difference between the 2 incarnations and the original. Be it their aura of cultivation or appearance, they were completely the same. Despite the dread he felt in his heart, Han Li patted Silvermoon's shoulder and quickly whispered something to her. Silvermoon obediently nodded. Having already dispelled the restriction on her body, she returned to the form of a small fox in a flash of white light and swiftly entered Han Li's sleeve. At that moment, the 3 scholarly men swept their sleeves and slowly made their way towards Han Li. Their movements clearly appeared relaxed, but in a matter of only 3 steps, they had already arrived only 30 meters away from Han Li. With a vastly changed expression, Han Li flapped his wings without another moment of thought and disappeared from sight. "You want to leave, but where can you run?" the middle of the 3 scholarly men said with a chuckle. Afterwards, the 3 of them flickered with silver light and pursued him with a relaxed stride. With 2 steps taken in the air, the 3 of them also disappeared. When the pale old man Ma saw this, he suddenly leapt away at great speed, wordlessly transforming into a streak of white light as he tore through the skies. The green-robed woman sneered at the sight of this and formed an incantation gesture with her hands before chasing after him in a breeze of wind. She no longer had any worry of Han Li, knowing that a divine sage was chasing after him. Additionally, this old cultivator wasn't capable of lightning movement, so he definitely wouldn't be able to escape her. As for the grand formation in the area, it was hardly effective against a nascent soul cultivator. Its restrictions were easily swept away. In an empty wilderness with a darkened sky, claps of thunder echoed through the air with flashes of silver light, each flash revealing the figure of a distraught Han Li. He was hurriedly glancing behind him with an expression of resentment. "Silvermoon, how many days have we fled?" Silvermoon's voice worriedly spoke in Han Li's mind. "It should be about 4 days already. If Master rests for more than a few minutes, this late nascent soul stage cultivator will immediately catch up. Is there truly no way to escape his spiritual sense mark? This is far too dangerous. Although you have the myriad year spirit milk to restore your magic power, you've almost exhausted your divine devilbane lightning. Without the lightning movement, you won't be able to escape his pursuit and movements. Such profound abilities are on par with instantaneous movement itself. There are hardly any differences to be said. Were it not for Master's shrewdness to completely avoid fighting and continuously flee, we would been tangled down without a method of escape." Han Li wryly smiled and resentfully said, "The trace of a late nascent soul stage spiritual sense can be tracked down by a couple hundred of kilometers. Although my own spiritual sense is beyond that of a mid-nascent soul stage cultivator, it is still quite lacking to a true late nascent soul stage cultivator. After all, I didn't learn the great development technique to completion. I haven't been able to get my hands on the last layers of the technique. Once this chase ends, I'll immediately head to the far west and find the final layers of that chant with certainty. In the past, I've never had this problem because my spiritual sense was always superior to my opponents. But now, my hands are tied and I find myself helpless in spite of whatever methods I use. Silvermoon worriedly muttered, then how about master use blood shadow evasion? In a single use, he'll be able to traverse over 50 kilometers. Surely you'll be able to break free of his spiritual sense tracking. Although Silvermoon hadn't mentioned anything about Han Li saving her life, she was touched by it nonetheless, causing her tone to feel particularly concerned. Having already considered the matter, he wryly smiled and said, a single time won't be enough. I'll have to use the blood shadow evasion at least 2 times in succession, perhaps even 3, and exhaust all my remaining divine devil bane lightning for a good chance at escaping. Although my magic power is slightly greater than ordinary early nascent soul stage cultivators, it is still quite dangerous. Even if I come out unscathed, I will be weakened for quite a long while. Now that no other methods will work, this is the only option left. Master, you. Han Li's expression suddenly changed and he turned his head behind him. He gloomily snorted. That person is grower closer to the second. I can no longer continue like this. I can only take the risk. When Silvermoon heard this, she chose to keep silent. Soon after, Han Li deeply sighed and his hands quickly blurred as they formed a series of strange hand incantations. At that same moment, his body began to pulse with azure light and an astonishing spiritual pressure suddenly released from his body. He then spat a mist of scarlet blood essence from his mouth. It scattered in the air and seeped into the azure light surrounding his body, transforming it into a demonic fusion of crimson and azure light. Soon, Han Li's hands and face became dark red, and countless threads of crimson blood began to spurt from all over his skin, making for a frightful sight. Han Li didn't seem to mind this in the least and continued forming hand incantations at great speed. Spitting out another 2 mouthfuls of blood essence, Han Li became completely enveloped in a mist of blood and could hardly be seen. At that moment, radiance began to shine from the distant sky. 3 silver balls of light were slowly moving towards them. Silhouettes could be seen moving from within them. They were Divine Sage Zhong and his 2 incarnations. Their scholar robes fluttered as they calmly flew in Han Li's direction, however, they moved at an incredible speed in spite of their appearances. In an instant, they had already traversed a distance of over 400 meters and could see Han Li from the naked eye. Yi! One of the men wore a surprised expression, but he soon frowned. The azure crimson blood mist suddenly bursted with dazzling crimson light. As Han Li stood in place, he coldly glanced at the incoming Mulan Divine Sage before unfolding the thunderstorm wings behind his back. In the following moment, space itself warped around him, and Han Li's figure blurred from sight. A sharp ear-piercing shriek faded into the distance as suddenly as it had appeared. The 3 scholarly men simultaneously wore a face of astonishment, and the 3 glanced at one another before joining together with the man at the center. With a flash of silver light, the 3 men then returned into one. He immediately shut his eyes and released his spiritual sense in the direction that shriek had traveled in. The scholarly man glanced where Han Li had disappeared and revealed a trace of surprise. What kind of movement technique can travel 50 kilometers in an instant? It seems similar to the Devil Dao's blood movement, but the distance is astonishing. Having chased Han Li for several days, the Divine Sage had experienced quite a bit of surprise at having continuously pursued him for several days without rest. Even if an early nascent soul cultivator was capable of lightning movement, their magic power should long been exhausted, leaving them helpless to their fates unless one possessed a heavenly treasure capable of instantly restoring one's magic power, or a secret technique that drained from one's vitality. Now that Han Li employed a strange movement technique, it appeared he hadn't shown his full strength before this. But this was no matter, although he had already traveled 50 kilometers, Divine Sage Zhong was still tracking him with his spiritual sense. It would only be some more time before he caught up. Just as the scholarly man threw this, he narrowed his eyes, and his spiritual sense targeted Han Li once more. With a cold smirk, his body glowed with white light before setting off once more to give chase. But at that moment, the scholarly man suddenly felt Han Li's aura mysteriously disappear once more. He ceased his movements in shock. He suddenly thought of something and hastily expanded the perimeter of his spiritual sense by 2-fold before spotting Han Li once more. Yet before he could set off once more, Han Li's aura disappeared yet again. This time, the scholarly man simply stood in place with a face of amazement. Although his spiritual sense was vastly powerful, it could only reach a distance of a little over 100 kilometers. He could forcibly stretch his spiritual sense to acquire an approximate understanding of the environment, but it was beyond him to track someone at that distance. Of course, unless something impossible occurred like Han Li waiting in place for him to sweep his spiritual sense past him. Han Li was a truly cunning opponent. The moment he felt the Divine Sage's spiritual sense speed past him, he employed that strange movement technique several times in succession and slipped away. This was perhaps the first time in many years since the scholarly man had ever been played around with in this manner. He was a magnificent Mulan Divine Sage. Once it became known that an early nascent soul cultivator was able to escape him, his reputation would be greatly tarnished. However, he didn't have any intention to immediately continue the chase. Without any spiritual sense tracking along with Han Li's strange techniques, it would be difficult to track Han Li down again even with the use of secret techniques. Not to mention that he had already wasted several days chasing Han Li down. He couldn't continue the pursuit, especially given the uncertainty of success. After all, since he a Divine Sage had made an appearance, the other late nascent soul stage cultivators in the Heavenly South could no longer remain idle. He needed to return and join with the other Mulan Divine Sages in preparation. If they were jointly attacked by enemy late nascent soul stage cultivators, it would be extremely dangerous. After pondering for a long while with a restless state of mind, his face grew sullen and he flew back in the direction from where he came. In the blink of silver light, he disappeared from sight. In an area 150 kilometers away, Han Li was flying through the sky in a streak of azure light in a different direction from before. He was continuously taking out medicine bottles from all over his body and pouring whatever vitality healing medicine he had down his throat. His complexion was deathly pale and his eyes were listless. Silvermoon's voice echoed through Han Li's mind, "Master, are you all right?" Using the blood shadow evasion 3 times in succession was truly dangerous. Were it not for the many medicine pills Master had taken along the way, the third use of the technique would be... It's nothing. Although I've lost much blood essence, fortunately, I refined a few medicine pills in the past. So long as I consume them and properly rest for a few months, my cultivation should be fully restored. Han Li slowly replied with an exhausted voice. Having heard this, Silvermoon sighed and hesitantly asked, "Will you be returning to Soaring Sky City?" With a tone of helplessness, Han Li said, "Of course not. With a situation this dire, I must at least restore my cultivation before heading back to the 9 Nations Union. Otherwise, the Ghost Spirit Sect and whatever other enemies I have will be able to easily plot against me. I cannot brave such risks. Fortunately, I don't need to seek out an area with spirit veins, given the efficacy of the medicine pills alone. I simply need to find an uninhabited area and rest for a while. Furthermore, the bamboo cloud's warm swords are still tainted by the azure lantern flames. Although I've used the purple apex flames to forcibly restrain them, I must think of a method to remove the azure flames entirely or there will be later consequences." Silvermoon smiled and said, "That bronze lantern was a lineage treasure belonging to the Mulan tribes, so it should have some closeness to the Ghost Dao. This servant is confident that so long as Master spends some time, he will be able to refine those flames entirely. Regardless of what is said, the purple apex flames possess truly remarkable abilities." Han Li bitterly smiled and calmly replied, "With how things played out, these problems can only be solved slowly in the end." Afterwards, Han Li spoke no more and used the remaining spiritual power in his body to urge the light around him to fly faster. After flying for a day, Han Li ceased his flight and dropped down to an unremarkable valley. The Mulan Divine Sage should be unwilling to search this far away. He glanced around several times and found 2 suitable barren hills. Not only were they completely lacking any spiritual power, but they were also completely bare and inseparable from the other hills in the area. Han Li cautiously swept his spiritual sense past a 50-kilometer radius. Finding that there were no cultivators or spell warriors nearby, he felt safe and released Silvermoon. The small silver fox then obeyed Han Li's orders without any objections and twirled around, sweeping a yellow light around her and enveloping Han Li within it. In a flash of light, she brought Han Li directly with her into the side of the hill. The valley became desolate once more. With Han Li brought to the center of the mountain through Silvermoon's earth movement technique, Azure Sword Chi was shot out in a dense barrage, quickly carving out a crude, 10-meter wide room. In a blur, Han Li entered it and promptly sat down cross-legged. Not long after, Han Li opened his eyes and azure light began to revolve around him. Over 10 medicine bottles of various sizes laid before him. He needed to first refine the medicine pills he had taken before he dared to take any more medicine. As such, he calmly secluded himself as he restored his vitality. However, Han Li didn't anticipate that the damage to his vitality would be far greater than he had predicted. The amount of time he would need to recover would be much longer. As time dryly passed by, he meditated and focused on recovering with the aid of medicine pills. After around half a year slowly passing by, Han Li still remained within the center of the mountain. However, countless changes began to surge around the world. A battle to the death between cultivators and spell warriors was just off the horizon. And beyond Han Li's knowledge, his fame as the Drifting Cloud Sect's Elder Han had spread widely not only throughout the cultivators of the Heavenly South, but also through the ranks of the spell warriors. Whenever they heard of his name, none dared to hold him in contempt. His repute of matching a mid-nascent soul stage cultivator was already well known.